The final week of the culling descended upon humanity like a shadow that could no longer be ignored. 7 days remained until the Nordics promised reckoning, and the world had become a fractured tapestry of hope, despair, and resignation. The promised mental communications had begun, each telepathic message a silent, unshakable verdict delivered directly into the minds of billions. No words were spoken aloud, yet the chosen felt a crystalline clarity, a voice not their own, resonating with calm authority. You have been selected. Prepare to depart. For the rest, there was only silence, a void that spoke louder than any rejection. Across the planet, the marking process unfolded with eerie precision. Those chosen awoke to find a faint, luminescent sigil etched into the skin of their inner wrists. A spiraling pattern of light that shimmered in hues of blue and silver, visible only to themselves and others marked. It was both a badge of survival and a beacon of division, separating families, friends, and communities in ways no war or plague ever had. The Nordics had promised 10 million would be spared, selected for genetic diversity, adaptability, and mental resilience. Social status, wealth, and power, they had insisted, held no sway. Now, as the truth of those choices became clear, humanity grappled with the fallout. In a modest apartment in Chicago, Sarah Martinez sat on her worn couch, staring at her unmarked wrist. The silence in her mind had confirmed what she'd feared since the broadcast. She was not chosen. Beside her, 12-year-old Tommy fidgeted with a fraying blanket, his own wrist glowing faintly with the Nordic sigil. The boy's eyes, wide with a mix of confusion and guilt, darted between his mother and the mark that had appeared on his skin 3 mornings ago. "Mom," Tommy whispered, his voice trembling, "why didn't they pick you too?" Sarah forced a smile, though her heart ached with a pain she couldn't name. "I don't know, baby. Maybe they needed someone strong like you to start over. You're special, Tommy. Always have been." She reached for his hand, careful not to touch the glowing mark, as if it might burn her with its promise of a future she wouldn't share. The past week had been a blur of tears and desperate plans. When Tommy's mark appeared, Sarah had felt a fleeting surge of relief. Her son would live. But that relief crumbled as the reality sank in. She would not. The New Hope Community Center, where they'd been ensnared by the Ecliptic Order's labor camps, felt like a distant nightmare compared to this. At least there, they'd faced the horror together. Now the Nordics were tearing them apart with surgical indifference. "I'm not going without you," Tommy said suddenly, his voice rising with defiance. "They can't make me." Sarah pulled him into a tight embrace, her tears soaking into his hair. "You have to, sweetheart. You'll go to one of those safe cities they talked about. You'll have a chance to grow up, to make something good out of all this mess." She didn't tell him about the rumors, that the chosen would have their memories altered, the aliens erased from their minds, leaving only a select few to carry the truth. She couldn't bear to think of him forgetting her, even if it meant he'd be spared the grief. Across the city, in a fortified penthouse, Marcus Hawthorne sat alone, the faint glow of his own sigil a bitter confirmation of his survival. As a leader of the Ecliptic Order, he'd spent most of his life orchestrating humanity's fate, believing he'd secured his place among the chosen. Yet the victory felt hollow. Jorge Boras and Martin Shaw, his closest allies, had received no such mark. Their absence from this final chapter gnawed at him. Years of loyalty undone by an alien calculus he couldn't comprehend. Hawthorne poured himself a glass of scotch, his hand steady despite the chaos beyond his windows. The streets below were a cacophony of riots and prayers, families torn apart as the chosen were summoned to designated departure points. He'd been instructed telepathically to report to a secure facility in Colorado, one of the safe cities where the marked would be sheltered from the coming apocalypse. His role, it seemed, was to lead the survivors, a task he'd trained for under the Nordics' watchful eyes. But the cost of that leadership weighed heavily. The order he'd built was crumbling, its members discarded like pawns. In a suburban home outside Los Angeles, Erin Sullivan clutched a stack of handwritten journals, her unmarked wrist a silent testament to her fate. The former teacher had spent her final days as did Nadia Greaves, another unchosen, compiling everything they knew about the Ecliptic Order and the Nordics. Their makeshift archive, papers, digital drives, and audio recordings, was a desperate bid to preserve humanity's truth for whatever came next. "Do you think they'll find it?" Erin asked, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. Nadia, sitting cross-legged on the floor, looked up from her own pile of documents. "If anyone survives outside their control, yeah," Nadia replied. We've hidden copies in enough places, caves, bunkers, even that old library downtown. Someone's got to stumble across it eventually. Erin nodded, though doubt lingered in her eyes. Neither woman had received the mark, but they'd chosen to spend their last week fighting in their own way. Nadia's brother Jim, lost to the Order's cloud-seeding poison, and Erin's students, betrayed by a corrupted education system, fueled their resolve. They wouldn't go quietly into the dark. They'd leave a legacy of resistance. Not all accepted their fates with such resolve. In the Colorado mountains, Eli Rogers stood in the doorway of his underground bunker, a rifle slung over his shoulder. His wrist bore no sigil, a fact that didn't surprise him. The Nordics' criteria, genetic diversity, mental resilience, didn't favor a man hardened by loss and vengeance. His wife Emma and daughter Lena, taken by the Order's experiments, had left him a solitary warrior, unfit for their new world. "They won't take me alive," Eli muttered to himself, checking the bunker's supplies. He'd spent years preparing for collapse, and now, with 7 days left, he intended to ride out the apocalypse on his terms. The safe cities held no appeal. He'd rather die free in the wilderness than live under alien rule. As he sealed the bunker door, a faint tremor shook the ground, a reminder that the Nordics' plan was already in motion. Families everywhere faced similar fractures. In New York, a father tried to cut the glowing mark from his daughter's wrist with a kitchen knife, believing he could trick the Nordics into sparing her. She screamed as blood pooled on the floor, the sigil reappearing moments later, undamaged. In Mumbai, a mother offered herself to a roving gang in exchange for their promise to smuggle her marked son out of the city, away from the departure zones. In Tokyo, siblings, one chosen, one not, stood on a rooftop, debating whether to jump together rather than face separation. The divide wasn't just physical, it was emotional, spiritual. Some unmarked parents rejoiced at their children's survival, clinging to the hope of a better future. Others raged against the injustice, cursing the Nordics and the Order alike. The chosen, too, were split. Some embraced their destiny with grim determination, while others wept for those they'd leave behind. In Washington, D.C., President Ronald Bosman addressed the nation one last time, his voice broadcast from a secure bunker. His wrist bore no mark, a fact he'd kept hidden until now. To those chosen, I say, carry our spirit forward. To those who remain, know that we fought until the end. This is not surrender, it's survival, in whatever form it takes. Beside him, Lark Ferguson watched, his own unmarked wrist a mirror of Bosman's. The fight they'd waged against the Order had won them a fleeting victory, but the Nordics had rendered it moot. "We did what we could," Lark said quietly, as the broadcast ended. Bosman nodded, his gaze distant. "Now we wait." In his private facility, Nolan Husk stared at a screen displaying the upload progress of humanity's knowledge to an orbital satellite. His wrist glowed with the sigil. He'd been chosen, a nod to his intellect and innovation. Yet he felt no triumph. The archive was his final act for the unchosen, a gift to a future he wouldn't shape. As the progress bar hit 100%, he whispered, "Good luck," to a world he was about to leave behind. 7 days remained, and the earth trembled with the weight of its fractured families. The Nordics' judgment was absolute, but humanity's response was anything but unified. Some clung to hope, others to defiance, and all to the fading bonds that defined them. The culling was coming, and with it, the end of one era and the uncertain dawn of another. The safe cities rose like silent monoliths across the earth, their sleek, crystalline walls shimmering under the pale light of a world holding its breath. For the 10 million marked by the Nordics, these were the sanctuaries promised in the telepathic summons. A network of 52 fortified enclaves scattered across continents, from the icy plains of Antarctica to the arid expanses of the Sahara, each designed to shield them from the coming apocalypse. The chosen had arrived over the past week, guided by an unshakable instinct that pulled them to their assigned coordinates, their glowing sigils pulsing faintly as they crossed the thresholds. Inside, the cities defied earthly architecture. Towering spires of translucent material spiraled upward, their surfaces smooth yet alive with subtle vibrations, as if breathing. The air was crisp, infused with a faint metallic tang that hinted at unseen filtration systems. Streets curved in patterns that seemed both alien and intuitive, lined with low, domed structures that served as living quarters. Every surface gleamed with a soft luminescence, eliminating shadows and bathing the inhabitants in perpetual light. It was a world engineered for survival, not comfort, a stark reminder of the Nordics' utilitarian intent. Tommy Martinez stood at the edge of a circular plaza in Safe City 17, nestled in what had once been the American Midwest. At 12 years old, he was among the youngest chosen, his small frame dwarfed by the towering figures of adults milling around him. His wrist sigil glowed faintly, a constant companion since it appeared a week ago. The city's central hub, a vast, open space ringed by crystalline pillars, hummed with quiet activity as the marked explored their new home. Tommy clutched a worn backpack, the only remnant of his life with his mother, Sarah, who had tearfully sent him off 3 days prior. Her absence gnawed at him, a hollow ache he couldn't shake. A melodic chime resonated through the air, drawing every head upward. Screens embedded in the pillars flickered to life, their displays shifting from blank translucence to the same crystalline pattern that had heralded the Nordics' first message. The voice came again, neutral yet omnipresent, speaking directly into their minds as it had before. "Chosen of Earth," it began, "you are now secure within the sanctuaries prepared for your survival. The culling of the unmarked begins today. Should you wish to witness the restoration of balance, images of the process will be available through any holographic display within these cities. This is your choice. Those who prefer silence may turn away. You will be provided for and guided as you adapt to this new existence. Once the culling is over and safe time has passed, you will be allowed to roam the earth once more." The screen stabilized, showing a simple interface, a single glyph that pulsed faintly, inviting interaction. Tommy stared at it, his fingers hovering over the nearest display. Around him, others reacted differently. Some stepped forward eagerly, others recoiled, their faces tight with dread. A woman nearby, her sigil glowing on a weathered wrist, muttered, "I don't want to see it," before retreating to a domed residence. A man in a tattered suit pressed the glyph without hesitation, his eyes gleaming with a mix of curiosity and resignation. Tommy hesitated. He thought of his mother, alone in their Chicago apartment, her unmarked wrist a death sentence. Would watching bring him closer to her, or widen the gulf between them? He lowered his hand, stepping back from the screen. Not yet. Maybe never. In Safe City 42, perched on a plateau in the Andes, Marcus Hawthorne stood in a private chamber allocated to him as a designated leader. The room was sparse, a low platform for rest, a translucent desk, and a wall-sized screen that mirrored the city's eerie glow. His sigil shimmered brighter here, as if responding to the environment. The Nordics had singled him out in their telepathic instructions, confirming his role as a guide for the new humanity. Centuries of steering the ecliptic order had prepared him for leadership, yet the weight of this moment felt different, less a triumph than a sentence. He activated the holographic display with a deliberate touch, the glyph dissolving into a placeholder image. A serene view of Earth from orbit, its blues and greens still vibrant. The Nordics offer hung in his mind. Watch the culling or turn away. Marcus had orchestrated population control for generations. Witnessing the Nordics' version felt like a final accounting of his failures. He left the display active, waiting for the first images to appear, his expression unreadable. Across the ocean, in Safe City 9 near the former site of Reykjavik, Nolan Husk paced a communal hub where dozens of chosen mingled uneasily. His towering frame and sharp features marked him as an outsider among the diverse crowd, scientists, farmers, artists, children, all selected for reasons only the Nordics understood. His sigil glowed against his wrist, a testament to his intellect and adaptability, yet he felt no pride in it. The city's technology fascinated him, self-regulating systems, energy sources beyond human comprehension. But his thoughts lingered on the orbital archive he'd launched, now drifting above a doomed planet. A young woman approached him, her sigil faint against pale skin. "Mr. Husk, are you going to watch?" she asked, nodding toward a nearby screen. Nolan paused, his analytical mind wrestling with the question. "I don't know," he admitted. "Part of me needs to understand what they're doing, how they're doing it. The other part," he trailed off, thinking of the billions he couldn't save, including allies like Bossman and Ferguson. "What about you?" She shrugged, her eyes hollow. "My whole family's out there. I don't think I can handle seeing it." He nodded, respecting her choice. The Nordics had left it to them, watch or don't, but the decision carried a weight no technology could measure. Nolan moved to a screen, his hand hovering over the glyph, curiosity warring with guilt. The cities were not uniform in their responses. In Safe City 31, deep in the Australian outback, a group of chosen gathered in a central chamber, their displays already active. They sat in silence, some holding hands, others staring alone, waiting for the first glimpse of the apocalypse. In Safe City 50, atop a Himalayan peak, the marked largely ignored the holographic displays, clustering instead in small groups to share stories of those left behind. Parents, siblings, friends, forming bonds to replace what they'd lost. The Nordics' presence was subtle yet pervasive. No physical beings appeared, but the cities operated with an autonomy that suggested constant oversight. Food materialized in sleek dispensers, nutrient-rich bars and liquids that tasted faintly of nothing. Water flowed from crystalline fonts, perfectly pure. Instructions arrived telepathically when needed. Rest here. Gather there. Prepare for guidance. The chosen were safe, yes, but tethered to an alien they couldn't resist. Tommy wandered from the plaza to his assigned quarters. A small, curved room with a single bed and a screen embedded in the wall. The space felt sterile, devoid of the warmth of his mother's apartment. He sat on the bed, staring at the holographic display. The glyph pulsed softly, an invitation he still couldn't accept. Somewhere beyond these walls, Sarah was facing the end, and he was here, powerless to change it. He buried his face in his hands, the sigil's glow a cruel reminder of his survival. Marcus, in his chamber, adjusted his posture as the display flickered. The orbital view shifted slightly, a prelude to what would come. He'd seen humanity bend under his influence. Now he'd see it break under theirs. His role as leader loomed, but for this moment, he was just another witness, awaiting the Nordics' judgment. Nolan, still undecided, joined a small group forming near a hub screen. Their faces reflected his own turmoil: fear, anger, resignation. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, "we're the ones who carry it forward." The words felt inadequate, but they steadied him. He pressed the glyph, and the screen brightened, ready to reveal the fate of the unmarked. In every safe city, the chosen stood at a crossroads, watch or turn away, as the Nordics' promise hung over them. The displays were portals to a world about to end, and though the apocalypse had not yet begun, its shadow already stretched across their new homes. For now, they could only wait, divided by their choices as much as by the walls that kept them safe.